Hey folks, this is Rhykker, bringing you a Heroes of the Storm beginner guide to the 4 different roles that heroes can fall under: Warrior, Assassin, Support, or Specialist. In this guide, we'll cover what defines these roles and what your teammates will expect you to be doing as one of these different roles in a game. First off, we have Warriors. Warriors are the toughest heroes. They have more hit points, they are built to sustain more punishment than other heroes. Their strength is staying alive. Warriors generally can't do a lot of damage on their own, but they have different ways to stun, trap, or distract enemies so that their teammates could come in and secure the kill. Because you will likely be the toughest hero on your team, it's expected that you're going to be the one tanking those big hits. You are your team's front line. You are their shield, a defensive wall. Because you can sustain a lot of damage, you want to try to get the enemy to attack you instead of your weaker allies. Further, you want to use your crowd control powers to make it easier for your allies to pounce on an enemy, or even to help your allies retreat from a battle. In general, it's expected that the warrior is the one leading the charge. He is leading the team around the battlefield. Because you don't want your weaker allies to be caught out of position and to be the first one seen by the enemy and pounced on, the rest of your allies should know to stay behind you in order to keep safe and allow you to pick the engagements. Because of the way they're built, warriors will generally be the ones deciding when to engage the enemy. They have to evaluate the situation. Is this a fight that we can win? Do we have an edge here? If the answer is yes, then you're gonna dive in as the warrior. You're gonna take that first hit as your allies then swoop in and the fight is on. It's gonna take a bit of experience before you're able to make good calls on those decisions, and you should make liberal usage of the minimap pinging power in order to let your team know when you're going in and when you're retreating. If you decide you don't want to engage, hit V on the keyboard. That will call for a retreat, and hopefully your allies will listen to you. Sometimes you might want to stick around just a little bit in order to ensure your team can get away safely, but just make sure that you ping retreat so that they know you're not sticking around to fight, but rather just sticking around to ensure they're able to get away safely. Another key concept for the warrior is body blocking. Body blocking means using yourself as a movable obstacle to prevent enemies from getting somewhere. So you might body block to prevent an enemy from getting to an ally, or you might even body block to prevent an enemy from escaping. While technically anyone can body block, the fact that you have so many hit points and you're so tough means that you are best suited for this role. Also, you will be the front line, so you're going to be in the best position to do so. If your team is retreating and the enemy is chasing and trying to kill your fleeing assassin, for instance, try to body block, try to stop them from getting to her. You can also use yourself as a moving shield to absorb any shots that are being fired at your allies and basically take a bullet for them. This really works with, for instance, Nova's triple tap. If there's a Nova on the enemy team and you see that laser-guided bullet pointing at one of your teammates, get in the way. If you have the hit points for it, move into that line so you take the hit. Likewise, if you see the enemy trying to escape, trying to retreat, and you can get maybe one of them out of position, section him off from the rest of his team. Maybe you're playing as ETC, and you can power slide in front of him, cutting off his escape and then body blocking him just enough in order to let your team catch up and kill him. Do it. Onto the support role. It's pretty straightforward. It is in the name itself, support. Supports are nothing if they have no allies to support. Their job is to support their allies, and they have different buffs, heals, and shields with which they're able to do this. Support does not mean healer. Most supports do have healing abilities, but not all of them do. Some simply have shields, for instance. But nonetheless, the focus is on keeping allies alive. And again, you'll do this through buffing them and crowd controlling or debuffing enemies. You don't do a lot of damage on your own, but you're able to keep those who do bring the damage alive, and you're otherwise able to make them do their job more easily. Onto the assassin. Very straightforward, assassins bring the damage. Assassins are among the weakest characters with respect to how much damage they can take, but that's because they are glass cannons. They bring a tremendous amount of damage themselves. Now, we're going to make a distinction between ranged assassins and melee assassins here. As a ranged assassin, you really want to make sure that you're not getting anywhere close to the enemies. Rather, you want to be as close as you have to be, and no closer than that. You will be a priority target. The enemy knows to be wary of you, so make sure you stay behind your tank and near your support. Because you're so squishy as an assassin, you have to be very mindful of your positioning. You also have to learn to recognize priority targets. It is the warrior's job to tank hits. So ideally, you don't want to be hitting the warrior. Ideally, you want to be hitting the enemy's assassin in order to kill their damage potential, but a support or a specialist can also be a good target. If you can't hit anything else, then do hit the tank, but just auto attack. Don't waste your big cooldowns on the tank. Wait for a better target to come into view. And while it may be tempting to run after a fleeing hero, be very careful. If you're running off away from your team and away from where you have vision, this is probably a terrible idea. Unless you're sure there are no enemies that are going to be there waiting to pounce on you now that you're alone, don't do it. Learn your damage potential. Learn how quickly or how many shots it takes to kill enemies and take calculated risks. Don't dive out into the middle of the enemy team, but if you have to take a couple steps forward to take that one shot at the enemy assassin and then step back, that's an acceptable risk. As for melee assassins, try to stick near the safety of your warrior. A lot of the same still applies, except as a melee assassin, you obviously have to get into melee range in order to deal damage. That's why a lot of melee assassins come with what we call gap closers or escape mechanisms. Something that allows you to get into the battle very quickly or out of the battle very quickly. Again, as an assassin, you're going to get focused down by the enemy team, and you have to retreat to safety before you die. Don't go killing yourself just to kill one enemy. In most cases, that's not a good trade. If you kill yourself just to kill one enemy, what you're saying is that you are worth less to your team than the person you killed is worth to their team. As a melee assassin, you want to engage when you know that you can go in and get out safely, or ideally go in, kill someone, and then escape. Of course, there are exceptions, such as if your team is behind and there's one particular enemy hero that's really giving your team a hard time, then a one-to-one trade might be fair. But unless the enemy team is already wounded, that's probably not a battle that your team should have been fighting anyway. Now, a quick note about Nova and Zeratul, the two stealth assassins. Both Nova and Zeratul become invisible when they're not attacking. Their playstyles are a little different from other assassins, in that they're generally even squishier. They die even more easily. However, they're able to deal even more damage. They are the assassins of assassins. Playing Nova or Zeratul requires probably more patience than any other hero. You're gonna spend a lot of time roaming the map, and you're gonna look for opportunity targets. An enemy that is injured, or an enemy that has overextended, that is to say, pushed way too far down a lane, that it'll take him a long time to get back to the safety of his towers, or someone who is just solo pushing a lane. You can win just about any one-on-one battle. So you want to pick engagements where you're able to end the battle very quickly, where you're able to do your damage and then get away. You don't want to be uncloaked for any long duration of time, because the enemy will focus you down like no one else. On to the specialist. Now, the specialist role is the most complicated, or rather, it can be. A lot of complicated heroes will fall under the specialist category. In general, though, specialists are best at dealing siege damage. What does that mean? They will specialize at killing minions, killing mercenary camps, and killing towers, walls, and forts. In general, a specialist hero is able to solo a lane. This isn't always the case, but it holds true in most situations. The specialist is the one you're most likely to see soloing a lane. And that's because they're able to put out more siege damage than other heroes, and thus clean up their lane by themselves, whereas other heroes need 2 or 3 working together in order to do the same amount of work. In teamfights though, the specialist behaves more like an assassin. That's about all we'll say about the specialists for now. For more in-depth advice, you can check out my upcoming guides on the specific heroes themselves, because there is an enormous amount of variety in gameplay style amongst the specialist heroes. Now, one note to add here is that while every hero does fall under a certain role, depending on your talent choices, you could actually specialize your character towards a slightly different role. Maybe you're a warrior, but you've taken a lot of offensive powers that makes you a little bit like an assassin. Or maybe you're an assassin, but you took a lot of defensive options, so you have a little bit of tanking ability. Depending on what heroes or what roles you have in the party, you may find yourself having to change your role a little bit in order to complement a strength or make up for a deficiency. For instance, if you have no support on your team, then you may want to try to take some talents that are a little more support-oriented. Further, if you have two people of the same role on a team, for instance, two support characters, then you may want one of those supports to specialize more towards a different purpose. For example, instead of both going full healing, maybe one could focus more towards dealing damage. That wraps up this guide. Thanks for watching. Check out these other videos, and stay tuned for more Heroes of the Storm guides on different heroes, maps, and just general tips. Leave a comment letting me know what your favorite role is. And if you enjoyed this video, share it with friends, hit like, and subscribe to join Rhykker's Raiders.